So today's session is voting during a pandemic. So as we all know, this is a very different sort of year when it comes to how we engage in our voting process. And we are seeking to give you all some information about what the voting process looks like in Massachusetts, maybe some new processes such as mail-in voting and things of that nature. Our guest today is Dolores Berge. She is a graduate of Somerset High School. She completed her degree at Johnson & Wales University in 1982 and went on to take some courses at Bristol Community College. In 1987, she took on her first municipal public service career within the water pollution control facility and had moved into the town clerk's office of Somerset in 2002. And in 2011, she assumed her current position of town clerk for Somerset. So throughout the course of the semester, our varying social media platforms have been kind of a platform for getting out the vote. I'm hoping that if you all are here, I might be preaching to the choir about how important it is to get out and vote. But I'm hoping all the same that you will not only do it yourself, but you will encourage all of the people in your lives to do the same. If there's anybody in your life who is unable to vote, that doesn't stop them from being able to promote voting to those who can. And then perhaps asking those folks to vote on their behalf, since they are unable to do so themselves. I think one of the primary topics for today's conversation is being able to understand the process of mail-in voting. Mail-in voting it's something that has been basically in Massachusetts for quite a while now, but it was recently expanded to include all residents of Massachusetts. The process for mail-in voting has been kind of subject to a lot of questions, and I think maybe a lot of you might have some of those similar questions.
Basically, if you would picture a wheel, I am in the middle of that wheel, and the rest of the town is the spokes, all the departments. So everything, in a sense, ends up coming to me. I am the keeper of all the town's records, which means any town meetings that are held, all the elections that are held, any appointments, people that retire, resign, everything is in my office. We're also in charge of all the vital statistics that happen in our town for whether someone resides here or has a vital occurrence here, being a birth, a death, a marriage. We issue marriage licenses in this office to anyone in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. We issue dog licenses. We do raffle and bazaar permits. We basically do pretty much everything. If someone calls my office and their question is not for me, we do our best to answer the question or direct them to the proper department. So again, we're in the middle, and every office branches off of the town clerk's office.
Off of you.
So we have to answer to every department, or at least assist every department in one way or another. So
excellent. So
it's a busy day.
Oh, I believe it. I'm sure that it's a busy time of year given the current election season that we're in.
And I'll also point out that town clerks usually are the chief election officials as well, but in cities that is very different. Cities have election commissions, so city clerks don't do everything that town clerks do, if that makes any sense.
So they're more specialized in their focus, and whereas you've got to be a jack of all trades, so to speak.
Right. The city clerk still will handle vitals. They'll still be the keeper of the records for the cities, but they do not have elections in their office. They handle their city census, annual census, but they don't deal with the elections. So town clerks are kind of get we get it all. We do it all in here. So.
And so what is the kind of day-to-day like for you right now in a standard election year? What are you working on at the moment?
Right now, if you could see behind my laptop, you would see boxes lined up with all the ballots that are already being returned. So this year obviously has been an extremely, extremely busy year for us, not only with elections, because our town, we had 4 elections this year. As everybody knows, presidential primary March. We had our town election was supposed to happen in April, got postponed to June. We had a state primary in September, and now we're embarking on the big one, which is our state election and includes the president. It's not a presidential election,
Okay, I
is,
will
but
correct
our
my
ballot
language
says
on
state
that.
election. If the ballot says state election, I can't tell you how many people have called us and said, my ballot says state election. Where's my presidential ballot? Well, if you look at the first office, that's your presidential ballot. So in Massachusetts, it says state election. You're also electing state offices at the same time. So every 2 years, there's a state election. Every 4 years, there's a state election with the president on it. Okay, so we're slamming right now with incoming and outgoing ballots. We're also getting calls every single day. Where's my ballot? When did you mail it? When am I gonna get it? And it's hard for us because we can't mail those ballots out until we get them. So we just got them last Wednesday at 1:30.
Oh, wow.
And we worked Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. We got 5,098 ballots out. So they're
And
out
these are
there.
the ballots that were requested for folks who are looking to do
Vote by
mail-in.
mail. Vote by
Okay,
mail or absentee. So we'll touch on the difference on those a little bit later.
absolutely. Well, so can you talk about kind of I guess that actually is a nice segue. Talk about the voting process in Massachusetts. I know that how the voting process goes in Massachusetts isn't necessarily the same for every state in the union.
That is
And we
true.
also have some new processes
That's
that are going into this election, such as mail-in voting.
Right. So Massachusetts has always had in-person voting on election day. But we have also had for a very long time absentee voting by mail. So a lot of people took advantage of that, but with absentee voting, there was requirements. You had to be disabled and unable to make it to the polling location, out of town, out of state, out of country on election day, or due to a religious belief, you would not go to a polling location. So there's always been voting by mail, and I think that that is kind of something that a lot of people don't get because everybody's afraid to vote by mail, and we've always had it, and it's always been very successful. The state of Massachusetts has a real-time voter registration information system. So we are, as soon as we get one of those applications, we're keying them into the system. We know that the person's going to vote by mail. The voting sheets come out with an X already. And that means that that person shows up at the polls. We're going to say, oh, you already sent us a ballot. You voted absentee. So absentee voting. In 2016, they introduced early voting in person. So that was the first year, 2016 presidential election, that early voting was done in Massachusetts. Now they have early voting by mail. So we have early voting by mail and absentee voting by mail. So we obviously with the pandemic are getting inundated with the vote by mail. The other thing that was new this year was the state elections division, the Secretary of the Commonwealth, mailed out cards. They were small white cards, and they went to every registered voter in the Commonwealth, whether they were an active voter or an inactive voter. And when we talk about registering to vote, we'll touch on that. But
Good.
everybody that was registered, whether they were active or inactive, received a white card. They had the option to vote in the primary and the presidential election, either or. They could have voted just in the primary or just applied to vote by mail for the state election. So I felt like there was a very, very, very high turnout for our primary in our town compared to other years, due to the fact that people had that opportunity to vote by mail in the primary. I gave a lot of civics lessons over the phone with the primary, because there's a lot of people that don't understand what a primary is. So they would get the ballot that they asked us for on the card, because a primary, you have to vote by party. So they would call us and say, why did I get this ballot? And I was like, I have your card in front of me. You asked for it, but they didn't understand that that primary was to put forth one party candidate to the state election ballot. So there were a lot of questions about that, but we did have a higher than normal turnout for that primary. And a lot of people chose all elections this year on that card. So now they're getting their November ballots. So that is all new for this year, was the early voting by mail.
Okay. And so what does that process look like when it comes to, so there's early voting in person. So
Right.
what are the kind of the differences between those? What does that look
Between
like when you're voting in person? Early voting.
early
in person?
voting in person as opposed to early voting by mail?
Correct, because I know that there's different deadlines, you know, like, so there's a period of time where you can do early voting in person. So what does that look like and how does that translate into the early voting by mail?
Okay, so early voting in person is October 17th till October 30th across the Commonwealth, including Saturdays and Sundays. The hours for early voting in person vary by city and town. The hours are set by the chief election official, the town clerk. The requirement under the law is that we have to hold early voting Monday through Friday during our regular election office business hours. So each city and town has different hours. So you got to check that first. The Saturdays and Sundays, our hours were set by population as to a minimum and maximum number of hours. So for me, we have 18,000 residents. We have 13,000 registered voters. I fell into the 4-hour category. So it's mandated that I do 4 hours of in-person early voting, both Saturdays and Sundays during those 2 weeks. So if there's students out there that live in another community, you want to check your community's website and find out where your early voting hours are. So when you go to vote early in person, it's almost the same process as when you're voting early by mail. You're going to check in at your check-in table as soon as you walk into your polling location, and you're going to get an envelope. On that envelope is an affidavit that the voter has to sign. If that envelope is not signed, we cannot count that ballot because we're not going to be able to check off whose ballot that was. Okay, so they check in, they get that envelope. They'll be directed to fill out the envelope. Once your envelope is filled out, you get your ballot, you go into a voting booth, you vote, you seal that envelope, and then you're going to deposit it into a box, not a tabulator, okay? Not a tabulator. So early voting is tabulated on election day.
That's
Okay,
important to know.
very
Absolutely.
important. Yes. So the state of Massachusetts is allowing clerks, if they want to hold public early voting ballot processing and early voting ballot tabulating. I'm sorry, I talk with my hands, but I'm Portuguese. So it's up to the clerk if they want to do it, but it's got to be open to the public. It has to be advertised 3 days in advance. So let me go back to when you early vote by mail. When you early vote by mail, we mail you a ballot, instructions, an inner envelope, and a return envelope. That envelope that I said you have to sign when you vote in person, you have to do that when you vote by mail as well.
Okay.
Okay, so the signature on that and the signature on the vote by mail application, obviously we want those two to match. So we know that that person, it's an affidavit, they're signing under the penalties of perjury that they are the person who requested that ballot and they are the person that is voting. So we get all those back in the mail. We sort them by precinct, by address, so that they match the voting sheets on election day. So whether the person votes in person early or by mail early, those ballots are all going to be processed through the tabulator in my town on election day. But we are going to pre-remove. So for 2 days during the early voting period, I have assigned one of your listeners will be helping me with that. We are going to advertise that. I've already got it advertised that we're going to hold 2 early voting ballot removal days. So
And what
all
does
we're
that
gonna
mean?
do.
Is that just sorting through the ones that don't have the requisite signatures and things
Nope,
of that?
nope,
Oh,
that's
no.
already
Okay,
pre-done.
got
That's
it.
done. We do
Okay.
that here. What we're gonna do is just take a envelope opener and we're gonna open all those envelopes once they've been verified, received, dated, put into the system so people can track them. And they're sorted by precinct. They match the voting sheets. What we're gonna be doing early is just opening them and removing those ballots. All those envelopes have to stay exactly the way they were before we opened them, because on election day, my poll workers will stand at that check-in table and check in every single person that voted early, whether it be by mail or in person, as if we are that voter. So their ballots are there, their envelopes are there, their ballots are gonna be, I'm gonna do them in bundles of 50 because I don't want to overwhelm anyone when they're opening them. They have to keep those envelopes in order. All those ballots will get bundled in 50s because when we check them in, we're checking them in for the voter. And all those ballots are in a pile by a holding right there with a poll worker, and then they can go to the tabulator. But we check in every single person that already voted. So when we do that, there's already an X in their box, which indicates to my check-in inspectors, this person already voted by mail. When we cast that ballot, there's a red X that goes over it. So now you know that not only did we receive it and that person voted by mail, but we've also cast it if there's a red X there. So once a ballot's returned to us early, in person or by mail, that voter cannot vote in person. And the sheets will tell my inspectors that. So if somebody shows up and says, I want to vote, my inspectors are going to say, oh, we already have an X here. We already have a red X. Your ballot's already gone through the machine. And if we were challenged, we would have that envelope right there at the polls with that voter's information on it. So,
And because that's one of the things that we hear about is this, sort of this idea that mail-in voting can lead to fraudulent voting, right? That people might try to double vote. And so from what I'm hearing from you is that there's a pretty strict process in place to keep that from happening.
And I can only speak for Massachusetts.
Sure.
Okay, so, we hear stories on the news. You've heard them, I've heard them about all these ballots. These people voted twice. There were dead people voting. Our system is a on-time system. So being a town clerk, I am processing death certificates and I am processing election stuff on the same day. So the day I get a death certificate, that person is deleted and they're no longer on those voting sheets because it's one in the same system. You know what I'm trying to say?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm getting a death certificate. I'm deleting that person from the census and the voter registration system. So I don't know how these other states operate, but maybe their elections are separate from their vitals and they don't get that information immediately. And that's the only thing I can think of. In Massachusetts, I feel that we have a very, very almost immediate system. I mean, if someone dies election day morning, there's nothing I can do about that. Their name is still going to be on the sheet. The new this year, too, is that if someone has applied to vote by mail, they have voted their ballot, they have signed their envelope, we have received it in this office, stamped it in and put in the system that they voted, but they die before November 3rd, that ballot is counted. This is new this year because prior to that, if someone passed away before election day, the ballot was taken out and rejected as deceased voter. This year, the new regulations say that we will still cast that ballot as long as we received it prior to election day. So so for every resident, that ballot is considered cast as soon as we receive it in the election office. There's no turning back.
So Dolores, we have a few questions coming in
Okay.
through our chat, and I'm trying to ask them kind of dovetailing off of what you're speaking about at the time. So we just had a question come in. I know that you represent Massachusetts, and that's really where your expertise lives. But we have some students who are residents of Rhode Island. and are
Mhm.
kind of wondering if you're aware of any sort of differences in these processes between Mass and Rhode Island.
The dates, definitely the dates. I think today, if I'm not mistaken, may be the last day for residents to request a vote by mail ballot in Rhode Island. Okay, for us, it's not until October 28th. So that's a big difference. I'm not sure what their registered to vote last day is for this election. Ours is not till the 24th, but I would advise anyone who's a Rhode Island resident to go on to the Rhode Island. I want to say that they have a statewide elections website, and then you can go down and get your precincts and where you vote and the deadlines right on that main website. Just as Massachusetts has a Secretary of State's website here, you can go on and you can find your town, you can find your ballot, you can see if you're registered. Thanks, John. But I don't know a whole lot. My son is a resident in Rhode Island, but I don't really know too much about, I know he votes in person, he doesn't vote by mail, so he knows where he goes and the days he goes, but I don't know too much. But I do want to hit on that question before that one. If you're
Yes, yep.
registered to vote in another town in Massachusetts, is it too late to change my address? No. So as I was just saying, the last day to change voter registration information in Massachusetts is October 27th. Yes, that's a Saturday. Yes, that falls right in the middle of early voting. I think it's the 24th, actually. Let me check my notes here.
For the last day to register?
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
saying the 27th. It's a Saturday, so I think it's
I think the 24th is, yep.
So the hour is 8 p.m. Register to vote online. That's my suggestion, because if you're on here, you know how to use a computer, register to vote online. But there's plenty of ways to do it. You can do it with a paper form. You can do the Massachusetts online voter registration system, which I have the websites for those. I'm sure that John can call those up too. And you just need to make sure that it's done by 8 p.m. So if you did it online, the Secretary of State's office at 8 o'clock shuts that off. And if you try to register after 8, a message will pop up that says the deadline to register or make changes was 8 p.m. Okay, so that's one thing. You have plenty of time to do that. When you get your confirmation from the town in Massachusetts that they received your new voter registration, they will be mailing out an acknowledgement that says, we got it, this is where you vote. They will also be including the vote by mail application. So once you are registered, they are supposed to be sending out that vote by mail application. So you should be able to apply for both. The last day to apply to vote by mail is the 28th, which is a
And is
Wednesday.
that so that's the last day to apply to vote by mail, which means that you'd be requesting your ballot by the 28th, and then it would get sent to you.
Right.
Is that the recommended time frame, or is there kind of an earlier date that from your experience might be kind of better to hit rather than the official deadline?
Well, if you're planning to mail that ballot back, I would go before that deadline. But every city and town in Massachusetts now has a drop box, usually located right at their election office. If you're going to request it, you can't pick it up. That's one thing. We get that a lot. Well, I want to vote by mail, but can I pick it up? No, it's against the law for us to hand a ballot to somebody unless someone has been admitted to a medical facility within 5 days before the election. Then we can turn that over to a family member to hand deliver to them in that facility. Otherwise, no, we have to mail it out. So if you plan to return it here, that time frame is fine. But if you're planning to mail that ballot back, I would give it a few more days. Although I mailed all my ballots out on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, and I'm getting them back by the hundreds today. So those ballots were already received Saturday, today, I don't know, because we only mailed them Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. And like I said, 5,098. I've emptied my box 6 times today and it's been full. So those ballots are getting out there to you. So there's no reason why they wouldn't get back to us. But with all the fear across the country, and again, I can only speak for Massachusetts, I feel like everything everything is being done very timely here with our postal service. I'm not
And so-
seeing big delays.
And so you were talking about, so there are the, you know, the drop boxes for your mail-in ballots. Does that have a different process? So I'm kind of, my mother would probably be upset with me because my mother's worked at the post office for my whole life. But is there a different process? Like, is there a different expediency when they pick up the ballots from those drop-off boxes
They
than from
don't.
like your standard mail boxes?
They
Okay.
don't. The post office has nothing to do with those drop boxes.
Ah, okay.
Those belong to the election official. So I am the only person, myself and my assistant, that has the key to that box. The custodian in this building doesn't even have a key to that box. So it's myself and my assistant. We are the only two people that open that box. We were here all weekend. We both worked Saturday, Sunday, and Monday, which was a holiday, just so we could keep on top of emptying that box and sending out new ballots for new applications, because we're still receiving them every day. So we're getting them on the online app. There's an online app to apply for a vote by mail ballot. We're getting them dropped off in our box. We're getting applications in the mail. We're still getting the cards. So every day it's a process. It goes out, they go out, we get new ones in, we find new things there. We're getting ballots ready to send out. When I'm done with you, I'll be sending out probably about 30 more ballots today, just from
Wow.
applications I got over the weekend. So
there's
it's a high number.
little concern about how secure the process is, right? Because it's going directly to you. And I think you were saying that within towns, with the town clerk's office, it's different for cities, just to be clear, right? But
Well,
these are going.
not so much.
Oh, no.
But the cities all had to get drop boxes too.
Okay, so
we have
same process then.
Correct. So the election officials are the only ones that empty those drop boxes. The post office does not touch those. The post office can only do United States Postal Service boxes. So shouldn't be touching those. So even if it's a city, say like Worcester, which is a very large city, say they chose 3 places to put drop boxes, they'd be the only ones that can empty those.
Okay.
That does not end up going through the mail, and then those would come directly to the election office to be processed. And if anybody's worried about dropping their ballot here and checking, Track My Ballot. The Secretary of State's website has a Track My Ballot. The second I bring those in, we make sure they're signed, we make sure they're valid, we date stamp them, and we scan them into the system. So you can see right on there, we got that ballot already. I see John is right on top of that.
Yes, he is, because we had a
already
question
checked out
about.
all those websites.
Yes. John is right on it, because we had a question about how do I confirm that my
Yep.
mail-in ballot's been
Yep.
received and counted. So that was very
Right.
timely, John. Okay. And then we had another question. If someone applied to vote absentee for all elections earlier this year, is it still necessary to fill out a vote by mail application?
No. So that Track My Ballot option feature on the Secretary of State's website will also tell you if you have a pending ballot coming to you for this election. If it says pending for this election, your application's on file. So that's another thing that has taken up a lot of our time, is that people that sent in those first cards, they're sending us paper applications now. They're applying on the app. I can't tell you how many people have duplicate, triplicate, and 4 times applied for a ballot for this November 3rd election. Only one of those applications is good. The first one we got. If we go onto the system and it says, yep, you already applied for one, that one we just mark it as a duplicate, and we're keeping all the duplicates in a separate box. Today, I had 5 duplicates whose I already mailed their ballots out last Thursday. So apparently they didn't get them in the mail yet, but they will. We had a holiday, so I get it. They'll probably get them tomorrow, or today, they could have put that application in overnight online or whatever. And today was like, wow, that was quick. Yep, I did it that fast. But yes, so once you're in, but my advice is always, if you're unsure, call your local election official, call your town clerk, call your city elections commissions, verify it. We don't mind getting the calls, but we also want people to be patient, because we're getting hundreds of, I know sooner we'll hang up the phone, it's ringing again. That's why I'm in this conference room, because if I was in my office right now, you would hear my phone ring constantly. So my
And what's your
assistant's in there answering it.
And how
Mhm.
many staff do you have in your office? Because
Me
okay.
and one full-time person.
So it's a lot of work.
It is. So I applied for a grant and I got $5,000 for staffing to help me with the processing of the vote by mail. Because it's so large, and because it's probably a big reason for it is because of the pandemic.
Mhm.
So all the cities and towns were given what's called the CARES Act funding. So my town administrator was more than generous to say to me, look, hire who you need, because we were working for the primary alone. We were working here. Oh, some days we were here 13, 14 hours. We worked 75 hours for 3 weeks in a row, both of us.
Wow.
Because there's only so much that the volunteers can do. They can't touch the VRIS system, just us. So they can't do any of that entering. We have to do all that. They can organize the ballot envelopes for me, but there's only so much they can do. So it's great
Legally,
to
right?
have them for labeling and stuffing and getting the ballots out, but then, there's still so much that we have to do. But yes, for my town, I would say I am one of the only towns this size, with the population this size, that only has 2 people in the office.
Wow. Yeah, I think Attleboro's where I live, and I think it's a pretty small office as
Yep.
well.
Yep.
But they're wonderful over there. So I highly recommend you checking into your local city
Yes.
hall or town hall so you can find your town clerk and getting well acquainted with them.
And I know for a fact that all of their websites are very updated with information about the elections and voting, and you can always email them. Sometimes I tell people, I know the phone's been busy all day. Shoot me an email. I promise you I'll answer it. And I'm pretty good at that, I think. So between Kathy and I, we're on the phone all day long, and we're really trying to get other work done. And it's almost impossible, but we will get the election stuff done first. There's no doubt in my mind. Everything else will wait. We have no choice.
So, Dolores, I just have a question. So I think one of the things that I hear from our students a lot is that they don't know if they're eligible to vote, and that can be for a variety of reasons that comes up. So for Massachusetts, who is eligible to vote and who is not?
Okay, so you must be 18 years of age. You need to be registered in a Massachusetts city or town. There's a difference between who's eligible to vote and what the voting rights are.
Okay.
I know you touched on that a little in your email. So to be eligible to vote, you cannot be a felon incarcerated.
Okay.
So
you have to be, so if you are currently incarcerated, you cannot vote. But if you have a felony record,
you can.
You can if you're not currently incarcerated.
Correct.
I think that's an important distinction, because I think there's a misconception, because different states have different rules, right?
That's right.
So in Massachusetts, if you do have a felony record, but you are not currently incarcerated, you still have the right to vote.
And if you're incarcerated and it's not for a felony, you can vote.
You can still have the right to vote.
Right.
Okay.
So basically, you just have to be a Massachusetts resident in a city or town, and you have to be 18 years of age. You can pre-register at the age of 16. So when you turn 18, we get a little notification that it's your birthday, and we can register them because they did it when they got their permit, say. You can, the registry has automatic voter registration now in Massachusetts, also new. That was new, effective January 1st of last year. Anyone that went to the RMV to conduct any business, they would get their voter registration would come through to us. However, 90% of them are duplicates. So was I crazy about that? Not really. I was not really happy about that, because we spend a lot of time sending out notices that says your voter registration was a duplicate, but it's only because they went to the registry, and it's really not their fault, because now it's automatic. So that's new. But yes, I mean, pretty much anybody can register to vote as long as they're 18 and a Massachusetts resident. And registering to vote establishes residency. It's one of the ways to establish residency as well. So a lot of times, if you're new to Massachusetts, you go get your license, they want proof of residency. A voter registration is actually one of the ways, but now they do it automatically there. So it's kind of like a backwards thing to me, but
Hmm.
at any rate, it does establish residency, and that's what students need to know. So if we have students in a college in Massachusetts, but they live in Rhode Island or they live in New Hampshire or Maine, that is a preference to them as to where they want. So they're really not residents living in the dorm, but they can register to vote here. But they've got to remember that after 4 years and you're not a student here anymore, you got to re-register back in your home state because it doesn't happen automatically. And that's another thing that even people that live in Massachusetts need to understand is if you move from one end of town, wherever you live, to the other end of town, we don't know that. We don't have ESP. We are not linked to tax records. That's something we get a lot. Oh, I paid my tax bill. You send me a tax bill. You should know I should be registered to vote there. Nope, because you could own 3 houses and I don't know which one you lay your head in.
Right.
So, where you lay your head should be where you're registered to vote. You could own multiple houses. So that's another thing that people need to know is it's not automatic until you go change your address at the RMV. Now that's automatic. But if you don't do that and you don't have to do that right away, we don't know where you are. And every form of election material requires a voter's signature. So when you're registering to vote at the RMV, you're signing your license. Guess who gets that signature? We do. So we can see that signature. So then when you send in your application to vote by mail, we can see that signature compared to your RMV signature. So, that's something else you can't even do. Like you have to do some form of a wet electronic signature on your, if you scan and email stuff to us. So that's another thing people don't understand. And if you do move and you don't change your address right away, you stay on our voter list as inactive for up to 2 state election cycles, which is 4 years. Because we don't know if you just didn't answer your census that year, or if you just didn't want to vote, or you didn't go to a town meeting. So you become inactive. And if you're on the inactive list and you show up to vote, you're not going to be denied. You're still going to be able to vote. You just need to show us, this is my ID. I'm still living in Somerset. This is my address. So they do have to sign an affirmation that they are still there and they show that identification. So
now, is that the same as a provisional ballot? Is that no, that's different. Can you talk about what that would be?
So you've been living in Somerset since 2016, say. You chose not to vote in town elections. You didn't vote in the state primary in 2018. And here it is 4 years later, and you have no voter activity. You never returned your census. Every 4 years, 4 years for every single person that's inactive, there's an automatic purge. So the state is saying, we haven't heard from you in 4 years. You haven't voted. You haven't gone to a town meeting. You have not answered your census. You must be gone. So that person, there's a mass like purge. So this year, anybody that hasn't had any activity since 2016 at the end of this year will be deleted by a purge. Okay. If you've been deleted, say last year when I had my purge, because anybody from 4 years before 2019 is now considered purgeable, if that's a word. And you show up to vote this year and you say, well, I never left. Well, you never answered your census. We sent you a second notice saying you didn't answer your census. You didn't vote. You didn't do anything since 2015. And you're here now. You're showing me your license. Okay, did you re-register or should you still be registered? Here's a provisional ballot. Give me your ID. We take your information down. That ballot gets researched. So we have the ability to go on the RMV site and make sure that that person isn't supposed to be somewhere else. The other thing that helps us prevent, because provisional ballots will get counted after election day. They'll get resolved either at the elections office or through the RMV. We have a direct connection with the RMV database too. So we send our voters information and they claim they registered to vote at the registry 4 years ago, not like it is now, which is automatic. They can tell us if they said no. And if they said no, they moved to Somerset, that provisional ballot will not be counted. But if
Okay.
we come back here and we find out that that person just didn't do anything for 4 years, but they showed me their license, the registry says they're still registered there, we can count that provisional ballot, and it's only because the voter was negligent in answering their census, or they just chose not to take any action over the last few years, 4 years.
So if
So
you simply didn't register to vote and then, you go to the polls, you didn't check your registration status beforehand and you say they're, you're not on our list and you say, well, I request a provisional ballot. I want to be able to cast my vote. If it turns out that that person never actually registered to vote, that provisional ballot is done away
no
with,
good.
right? Is
Yep,
no good.
it's marked. We don't look at the ballot itself. It's sealed in an envelope by the voter, and then we just mark it as why it was rejected and not counted. And then the voter can call and we tell them why. So a way to prevent that, and it's on the web, and I use it at my polling locations. I take my laptop and it's right there at my table, the warden's table. So I'm in the front of the room, precincts are in front of me. All the people go to their precincts, but if they can't find them, bring them to me. What I do is I put the laptop right there and I go to that Secretary of State's website and it's, am I registered to vote? And a lot of times people are registered to vote in another town. So they moved here, they never changed their voter registration, which, by the way, I can't accentuate this enough. It is the voter's responsibility to register to vote in the community in which they live. You can move from here to Swansea, you got to do it in Swansea. You can move from here to Fall River, you have to do it in Fall River. It's your responsibility. So with that feature on the Secretary website, a lot of provisions, I'll just write, I'll say, look, registered in Dartmouth, you may go there and vote today. If you vote here provisionally, that ballot's not going to count.
I think you
Check that
answered this
before they-
question. Oh, sorry, Dolores, go ahead.
Okay.
No, I was gonna say, I think you kind of answered this question before, but we've had some new folks pop in.
Yep.
Would you mind revisiting that the piece about, because I think it's really important, I don't want it to get lost. The idea of if you requested a mail-in ballot, are you still able to vote in person?
Yes.
Yes. And so what are the kind of rules around that? Like, can you bring
Okay.
can you bring the ballot that was mailed to you to the, no, okay, this is good. I'll let you talk then.
No. So what we suggest, if people call us now and they say, I did think I wanted to vote by mail, but with everything that's going on, I want to go vote in person. Fine. Drop that ballot unopened, put refused right across the envelope and drop it in our box. That way we can delete the X that's going to show up on election day saying you applied to vote by mail. If they don't return it to us, they can still go vote in person. There won't be a red X on top of that black X. So that means your ballot did not get returned and it is not considered cast. You applied for it, the X is there. You didn't let us know you were going to come vote in person, but nope, we didn't get it because there's no red X over that black X. So once they confirm that no vote by mail ballot has been cast, they can vote in person. So it's for us, it's a pretty simple process. The voter may just have to wait to make sure that we're not still, it's there, but it hasn't made it to that tabulator yet. But either way, once there's a red X in there, even if I come to the office later that day, November 3rd, you go vote in person. You applied to vote by mail, but at the polling location, it indicates it wasn't returned. But before you went to the polls, you dropped it in my Dropbox. And then you went and voted because you want to try to vote twice. Okay, this happens. So that one, you voted there. That one got the red X. It went through the tabulator. When I come back, and I try to process a vote by mail one, that one's getting rejected because you already voted. So do you see what I'm trying to say about it being like
Absolutely.
a real time? Even if I walked over there with that ballot and said, you know, I just got this one in the Dropbox at 7 o'clock, they're gonna say to me, nope, they voted in person, and I'm just simply writing rejected, and it's going in the box of not counted ballots. So you can, but you might want to have the courtesy of returning it and saying refuse, change my mind, whatever, and leave it in your town's Dropbox. So at least your clerk can be one step ahead of you, and you won't have to wait when you get there, and they won't be like, we got to investigate this. We got to make sure it hasn't gotten here yet. So
Yeah, that's great. And so the just to recap a little bit, the requesting for a mail-in ballot, the deadline is October 28th, but we highly recommend doing it sooner than that. Early voting is October 17th to the 30th.
30th.
To the 30th.
Check
So
with your local election officials for times.
for times, yep. And then also in terms of where to go do early voting, that's different than your normal polling station, at least in Attleboro. I don't know if that's true for,
Most cases. So the law says that early voting must be held at the local election office.
okay,
So with that said, and with being in a pandemic, a lot of city and town halls don't want that volume of people inside of them. So we were authorized to designate another location. So I've always held my early voting right here in this room that you see me in, because I had enough room, and we had the hallways, and we have an elevator, and it's, you know, and it's been good, but not now, because our building is still closed to the public. So we'll be right across the street at the Council on Aging, which is certainly big enough, handicap accessible, it meets all the requirements. So you need to check, because what normally may have been may not be the same this year, just
right,
because, mostly because of the pandemic. If it wasn't for that,
absolutely.
I'd probably still be doing it here.
Yeah,
So
no, and
that's
I know from
important.
my own experience that normally, like you said, it would be at our local city hall. But there was a notification that it's going to be at the local Elks Lodge, probably presumably
Yep.
because of larger space. But as an
Right.
active voter, it was surprising to me. I shouldn't say surprising. I think I had just forgotten that the early poll, like where I would go to early vote, is not the same location as my typical polling station. And I think that's
That is
really
correct.
important to note.
Yeah.
Because if you go
And
to, if you go on the Secretary of State's website, that's where you can check your registration status. Do they have
Right.
your correct information, party affiliation, what have you? But I don't know if it, and you can check your normal polling station, but I don't know if you can check if it says early voting and where that's listed. I'm not sure if you know.
Yes,
It
yeah, I
is.
believe
Okay.
it does. They told us that we had to have all our early voting hours and locations in by a certain date because they wanted it to be available on the website.
That's
So
great.
I'm saying yes. And I see a question here. Let me see.
Oh, it's a little further up. Yep.
Oh, the COVID precautions.
Yes.
So I will touch on that. We are directed by the elections division about all of the precautions that we need to take as administering the election goes. We have been supplied with plenty of cleaning products and masks for voters, PPE. My poll workers have masks, they have face shields, and we have the guards, the spit guards on the
Mhm.
tables in between them and the voter. Social distancing, obviously, with the booths, and when you go in and early vote, you need to fill out that envelope, and we have obviously just two, like if people come together, they can sit together, and we have chairs for people to sit down and do that, and the booths are 6 feet apart. So yes, we have all those precautions in place. We always ask, of course, that you wear a mask if you're able. If you're not able to wear a mask, we have separate areas for isolated voting if that person wants to do that. We only had one person at the primary, didn't wear a mask, and did not mind voting in the regular area. Maybe concerning for other voters, but immediately after anyone votes, whether they're masked, they're not masked, they're wearing gloves, we are cleaning the booths after every voter. That's what I'm doing. So I feel pretty confident that the precautions we have in place are definitely going to be okay. And yes, they are in They are from the guidance of the Board of Health. My local Board of Health agent had to go to my polling locations early and regular to make sure that everything's in place.
So there are definitely solid precautions being taken so that
Right.
it is as safe to vote as humanly possible in person, if that's what somebody wants to do, right?
And I always suggest, you are the voter. You know what you need to do. Take your own personal precautions, but rest assured that we're taking it a step beyond that, and we're taking lots of precautions, lots of cleaning, lots of social distancing. Yeah, I think that people should feel comfortable.
Great, thank you so much. So then my other question is just around what we're voting for right now. So I am probably one of those folks. No, I am definitely one of those folks who talks about this as a presidential election, which you were so kind to correct me on in the beginning, right? It's a state election that happens to also include a national election, right?
Right.
So what are we voting for right now? I mean, what are
Right
the
now-
different things and people and positions we can vote for right now?
All right, so let's see.
Sorry.
Yeah, obviously, the very first office on the ballot is president, vice president. Then it would go to our highest state. I should have brought a sample ballot in here with me. Shame on me.
Sorry.
Because I don't know them like all at the top of my head. All right, so
Mhm.
you got your Congress, you got your state and reps, you have counselor, you have your, oh gosh, what is he? I know who's running for it. You think I could think of the office, but basically every ballot is different though. You got to remember that because these ballots are by district, congressional districts, representative districts. So you got congressman, you have your state rep, you have your state senator, you have your senator in Congress, your auditor, state treasurer, maybe. I'm sorry, I may have muted it, said I had a
I
bad
thought it was
connection
me
there.
for a second. I'm
So,
looking around like, did
I
I
got
just
the
do
message.
something?
My internet connection was slightly interrupted there. So at any rate, it's all your district. If you want to know who's on your ballot before you go vote, which is always a great idea, I kind of call it the know before you go. So know if you're registered properly, know what's on the ballot. You can see all the sample ballots on the websites that John has shared so kindly on the chat there, but you can see your ballot, you can track your ballot. There's so much. Now the questions are statewide. So there's 2 questions on the ballot. I'm sure everyone has seen the endless amount of commercials for the questions and the should I vote yes? Should I vote no? I don't know. I cannot tell you the answers to any of those questions because as the chief election official, I am not giving anybody advice. It is a neutral position. I can't tell you how many people have called and asked about the car question. And then my answer is, I don't know. Like, I still have to do my research. I've been so busy. I haven't even researched the questions. But even if I knew how I was going to vote on that, I couldn't tell anyone. And a lot of people need to understand that we as chief election officials, whether it's a presidential, a state, or a local election, all very important elections, the elections office remains neutral. I can't tell you how many times people call us and ask us questions. Who should I vote for? I don't know. You'd be surprised. So, I always suggest that people read the red book that was delivered to every single home. We've got them outside here by our ballot box for people to do research. It's on the website, the questions, the language, the law, exactly how it is, what a yes vote means, what a no vote means. Do your research. Know before you go. Know everything before you go. It'll make your experience so much more pleasant. You won't have to wait in line to find out where you registered if you're not registered here. Make sure you're registered where you live. You're going to go vote. Know what your precinct number is when you get there because most polling locations are divided by precincts. You want to know your precinct number. So for me, I have 5 precincts, 1 location. Everybody comes in and they look around and I'm like, do you know your precinct? No. All right, let me tell. What street do you live on? And I know almost all of them by heart, so I can kind of get the people moving through. But know your precinct. Some precincts are in different locations in different cities and towns. You need to know where that is. It'll save you time. So know that your registration is current. know that if you're on the inactive list, you need to bring an ID with you. You will fill out an affirmation saying you still live there and you do need your ID. Otherwise, if you're active and you voted in a state election before, you do not need to show an ID. Okay,
That's important to
that's,
know.
yeah. Massachusetts does not require an ID unless it's your first time voting or you are unable to provide an ID number when you registered to vote. It will say ID right on the sheets and our poll workers will ask for that ID. Got that, John?
Excellent.
He needs to know that. So, yeah, so it's a pretty good process and it's a quick process if you know what you're doing. So review your ballot, make sure your voter registration's up to date, know where you're going to vote, and you should have a very wonderful experience going in, casting your vote, putting it through the tabulator and leaving. So it should be a quick process. I just will touch, if you want me to, when you go to your polling locations, this is Massachusetts. I know there's some Rhode Island ones, but we're required to hang these up. So it's the Massachusetts voter rights, the Bill of Rights, the instructions on how to complete, how to vote when you fill in your little ovals. And then the middle one is about fraud. So these have to be posted in 3 places in the polling locations, and sample ballots. So very important to pay attention if you're waiting in line. Just take a quick look at the ballot while it's there. It'll help you. But I did want to just a little bit on the voters' Bill of Rights, because we talked about it being quick. The law says that if there are people waiting in line, you're only allowed 5 minutes in that voting booth. So if there are no people in line, you're allowed 10. Okay, that is something that is very hard for us to actually enforce, but we usually can tell my poll workers if someone's struggling with something, and then they may say to them, you've been in here a while. We don't want to say, hey, you gotta leave. We don't want to do that. But is there anything we can help you with? Voters are allowed to have people help them. You're allowed to spoil 2 ballots. You're only allowed to receive 3 ballots at the polling location. So if you spoil your first one, you need to turn it into the clerk. She's going to spoil it. She's going to give you a new one. You spoil that one, she's going to spoil it. She's going to give you a third one. If you spoil that one, you're out of luck. And what I mean by spoil is you made the wrong mark, or you overvoted, or you picked the wrong guy. However you spoiled it, that's it. You're only allowed 3. After that, we're sorry. That's in the law. You have the right to vote if you're disabled. Massachusetts has what we call an automark. It's a ballot marking device. So it is designed for anyone to use, but it has Braille on it. It has headphones. It has large print. So anyone with difficulty, even difficulty with marking the little circle, this machine will do it for you. Or you can bring someone of your choice into that voting booth with you to help you vote. So a lot of people don't know that. They can, if they don't have anyone with them, they can ask poll workers to help them, but there has to be 2 there. So they can always reach out and say, I can't see this. Ask if you forgot your cheaters. This happens a lot. People will get there and like, oh, I forgot my cheaters. I can't even read this. We have magnifiers. They're disposable. To ask your polling location clerk or warden or poll workers, do you have spare cheaters? A lot of us have magnifying glasses, spare cheaters. Just ask. Don't try to do it without it, because it might spoil your ballot. And pretty much it talks about having the right to vote absentee if you need to, that you have the right to cast a provisional ballot. It talks about the incarceration. So all the questions that you asked are hanging up on the wall in every polling location. Excellent. In Massachusetts. Excellent. So you can check those things out too. And even the things about fraud, which basically touches upon, you're signing anything that you do when it comes to voting under the penalties of perjury. So basically that's what that hits upon is, you're not supposed to be voting in someone else's name. You're not supposed to, so. But again, I feel like it's safe in Massachusetts. I feel like our process is very accurate. And again, it's So I received 300 ballots today. It's up to me to get those into that system quickly so that you, the voter, can see what we have done and what that your ballot did. We got it. We got it out of that box. You put it there 20 minutes ago. We got it. We already scanned it in. It's safe. It's locked up in our vault. And another important piece of information a lot of people don't realize is those ballots have to be escorted to the polling location by police officers. So another little safety thing that
Yeah,
people are like, oh, how do we know our ballots are going to get there? Well, because you're going to trust us as your election officials to get all those ballots organized, locked up there. It's recorded, it's labeled, there's locks on them, on the bags. They go with a police officer. So trust your election officials. If you're unsure, go on that website, check. I'm sure Rhode Island has the same thing. I see someone posted Rhode Island early voting in person, October 14th to November 2nd. So there you go.
excellent. All right, Dolores, I thank you so much. I think this is, unless you've got some other final thoughts, but I think that was a good wrap up of your final thoughts.
Well, there is one thing that I do want to express.
Sure,
One more
please.
thing, and
No,
I don't
please.
want them to find this out on election day. You cannot enter the polling location wearing any type of political propaganda, whether it be
Yes.
a button, a hat, a t-shirt, for any candidate who is on the ballot for that election.
That's
Okay?
very important to know. Yes.
There's a 150-foot rule in the state of Massachusetts. You need to stay 150 feet away if you are campaigning, if you're wearing anything political, if you are handing out anything. The voters are allowed to bring anything they want into the voting booth with them in their hands, but they need to remove it as well.
Okay.
Okay, so that's really important, especially for the presidential elections and the state of affairs going on right now. I'll share this one quick story. I know everybody's anxious to go. I did have someone come to early voting in 2016 wearing a Donald Trump mask. And he did not understand why he could not come in wearing that rubber full-headed mask to cast his vote. And he did finally take it off when he came in to vote, but it was a little bit scary for us because one, we didn't know who was under that mask. And two, he was starting to get a little bit angry that we were asking him to take it off. And he said, well, I have the right to, and unfortunately the laws in Massachusetts state that that can't be done inside the polling location. And we have 150 foot from the door rule. So when you go to vote, you will see those signs that say no electioneering beyond this point. And that goes for the attire as well. So that's just a little warning. And I had a voter show up actually at my early voting for the primary, and he was wearing a hat that favored a campaign. And he asked me, because I happened to be outside, and I didn't say anything to him because that candidate was not on that ballot, but he asked me if I would hold it for him before he went inside. And I said, oh, absolutely. I'll keep it right here with me on the bench. I didn't say to him, well, you don't have to do that, but he asked, but it's just a good thing for people to know so that you don't end up getting shocked when you go if you are supporting a candidate. So anyone that's holding signs, a lot of times campaign workers will be wearing a t-shirt or whatever, and they know that they have to turn it inside out. They need to put something over it if they're coming in to vote. So that's just another little tidbit.
No, I'm really glad you mentioned that, because I think that that's something not everybody knows.
Right, and especially this year, with all of the rallies and things going on, that people may participate in these rallies and then go think they can walk right into the voting booth wearing whatever they were wearing. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
No, I thank you so much for
That's in the law.
No, this was wonderful. This was very informative, Dolores. I'm really thankful for your time. I love your what is it, the know before you go saying, right?
Yeah.
It just speaks to the idea of voter education. So before you get out there and you cast your ballots and I think, sometimes, and I think this is true for a lot of people, I'll admit it for myself. I'm an avid voter, but I go there and, you have your auditor or whatever. And I'm like, I don't know who that is, right? So I think it's important to take a look at your
Yes.
full ballot before you
Right.
go. In some cases, I know you don't necessarily have an option. There's one person running unopposed or what have
That
you.
is true.
But when it
Yep.
comes to especially sort of the major players in the terms of the national elections and your Congress, state, local, things like that,
Right.
there is a lot to research. And I love that slogan. And I'm going to start using it. Know before you go.
Know before you go. I actually made up a nice little informational card and in 2016, and I had put it on the website, and I had them here, and I had them at the library and the Council on Aging, and it said all those things. Know before you go. Know that you're registered. Know this. Know that. Know, and it was nice. This year, I have nowhere to put them because nobody can go anywhere. But at any rate, it is important. It is important that people should know. Know your candidates, know your questions, know your personal information, make sure you're registered. That's the most important thing. And there's no stupid questions. So I just want to throw that out there because don't be afraid to call your local election office and ask those questions. If you're calling and you can't get through, keep calling because a lot of people are calling. Like I had somebody today say, I called your office for 20 minutes. I couldn't get through because every time we put the phone down, it's ringing again. So, and if we don't pick up at all, it's because we're in this room and we're processing and we're trying to get things organized. So leave us a message. We will call you back. Email us. Email's great. We always see the emails. I can see my emails when I'm sitting at home watching TV at 10 o'clock at night, so I can answer them. So send those questions in. Don't be afraid.
Thank you so much, Dolores. I really
welcome.
appreciate you coming and talking with us and imparting all of your wisdom. Everybody who joined us, thank you so much for joining us. Get out there and vote and know before you go.
Right. Excellent.
Thank you, everyone. Hope
Thank
you have a
you.
good night.
See ya.
Bye.